Ladies and gentlemen, I present the first installment of Yohan's Great Adventure. Once in a forgotten part of the British Isles, there lived a young boy by the name of Yohan. And he loved love. He was a hopeless romantic, but there never seemed to be any takers. There came a day when his mother, who was a local tradeswoman, and had a tendency to want her son to be more like her or his father, who was a local handyman. And in an effort to set him on that path, came to him saying, Yohan, my son, there's an internship for young traders and I'd like you to sign up for it. Yohan, being a young boy of 13, rolled his eyes. Mother dear, while I respect your wishes, I don't exactly enjoy the idea of doing volunteer work with my summer. Much less work as boring as local trading. His mother chuckled. I suppose that's your choice. And she smiled a wry smile. But I must warn you, my dear boy, if you insist on not participating in this apprenticeship, you won't be lazing about the house either. As you well know, you'll be the only one home and there are many chores to be done, so you'll be cleaning the house from top to bottom day after day. Yohan put his hand to his face. So any way you slice it, I'm stuck here working for free? Is that really fair? His mother thought for a moment. You have a point there, I suppose. I'll tell you what, I remind you, there is a potential to gain tips in this internship. However, I'll sweeten the pot even further. If I hear good reports, I'll pay you a beginner's wage out of my savings. But you have to give it your best. I won't accept anything less. Does this sound agreeable? And just like that, the bargain was struck. A week later, Yohan was sitting alone in a room with a woman that was slightly older than his mother. A round woman with a dark ponytail and a kindly face. She had deep gray eyes, and she wore on her face a pair of half-moon spectacles with a red tint, and it was one of those cases where you weren't quite sure whether there was a purpose to it or if it was just kind of a style choice. They rested upon the bridge of the woman's nose, so Yohan could make clear eye contact. Hello, Yohan. I'm Helen. I'm the overseer of this apprenticeship, and we'll get started just as soon as the others arrive. The others, as it turns out, were a young man by the name of Charlie, who was a bit of a heathen, and anyone who looked at him would know the type. One of those that viewed women as objects because the only ones he had had any interaction with in his life treated themselves as such. And this could be seen in the man's actions and behaviors. After he was introduced to Charlie, Helen gestured to the 7 young maidens. May I introduce Elodie, Fairly, Audrey, Goldie, Arden, Linley, and Lucy. Now, the three prettiest of the bunch were Goldie, Lindley, and the most beautiful of all by far was Lucy, a young, doe-eyed girl with hair that you couldn't quite tell whether it was blonde or a light brown. Her eyes, though, were unmistakably brown. And Yohan couldn't help thinking that she looked slightly becoming. Just enough to make her unapproachable in his eyes. To the point where he didn't realize the feelings that he was developing for her deep down inside. Or if he did, they were so confusing to him that he didn't quite understand fully what they were. And so he did what most men in this situation tried to do, which was to shove them deep down until he could process them later. Focusing instead on his work, which at that moment was the training and the orientation for the apprenticeship. It was, after all, why he was there. It wasn't long after introductions were given that they got into the minutiae of the trade union rules. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Said Helen in a clear presentational voice that sounded kind of artificial, but it was quite effective nonetheless. It is time to begin the training and introduce you to the wonderful world of the tradesman. Lindley, an engaged, pretty young redhead with clear spectacles, decided to raise her hand. "Don't you mean tradesperson?" Helen chortled, and you could tell she was trying not to make anyone mad as she said, Man in this case means mankind, dear, not male and female. Please learn your terms. You'll need them." She sighed. "Speaking of which," she passed out a rather thick volume to each of the apprentices. "You'll need these." They each opened their respective volume with anticipation and trembling. Inside were all kinds of things that mostly equated to the different terms for the trade and what they all meant. Shorthand and abbreviations. All of those kinds of minutia and terminology. Yohan opened his to the back where most of the space was, as Helen continued to speak. "The first thing you'll need to know is the importance of record keeping. Without accurate records, and I can't stress this enough, everything is going to fall apart, and nothing will be found properly. As a result, when people come to you with complaints of why they were cheated and the way they were treated by us, we'll have nothing to prove them wrong. That being said, as a result of the importance of all of this, anyone caught falsifying records in any way will be kicked out of the trade union and blackballed so that they'll never be able to work in this business again. He made a note of this, but also couldn't help wonder why someone would do such a thing. She continued going over the various rules and regulations of the trade union. Confidential records and how to treat them. How to handle certain individuals. The basics of these cases were pretty simple. If you didn't get bothered by them, don't bother them, they won't bother you. These were the two principles that they were given in the meeting, along with the concepts that laws would vary from province to province, and the two best practices were to contact your local nobles before setting up shop anywhere, and to check with the local trading bureaus. All of this training took about 2 hours and 30 minutes and went fairly well. Yohan was the last to leave the room, partially because he had a weak constitution which caused a lot of problems. He wasn't like the others. He was very sickly and pale and didn't have any muscle to speak of whatsoever. He walked differently than the others as well. The other reason he stayed behind is he wanted to study the notes more, and this was because his mother had convinced him that he should do it as well as he could. He was so focused, however, that he barely noticed when Lucy gave him a look. A look that he barely understood, and a smile that filled him with confusion and nervousness for some reason. Then, just as quickly as he saw it, it was over and she walked away. He waited another 5 minutes, and finally he went out of the building and walked home with his journal. And when he got to the house, there was no one home. His mother was off on a trading mission, and his father was summoned for some kind of handyman emergency, according to the notes that were left on the edge of the kitchen table. A nice oval one made of sturdy, solid oak wood. It was made by his grandfather. The notes had been placed on these metal trays. These were either made by his father or possibly found at some rummage sale, given some of the things used on a regular basis were acquired or made long before he was born. There was a batch of lentil stew on the stove, which he heated up by adding wood to the fire. After supper, he pored over his notes, and eventually he passed out in the chair. He found himself in another time and place. He was older, stronger, more able. His body was leaner and more muscular. He was laying in a canopy bed wrapped in silk and satin sheets. He wondered what kind of clothing he was wearing and looked down only to find his body bare, though he was wearing a plain gold wedding ring. He looked around and saw that the house he was in was a manor. There was a room filled with books and a table with a bunch of small writing devices that he must have designed for himself. They held paper in the top of them, and it seemed that on the bottom of them there was a device that held every letter of the English alphabet, and some even had runes in other languages. Some of the papers were covered with lettering on them, and in some kind of ink, like one would dip a quill in. The shelves were filled with leather-bound manuscripts. Yohan played around a little bit with writing, but never had he taken it seriously up until that point. His mother had always told him to go in something a little bit more sensible. Stories and fads will come and go, but people will always buy things, was her policy, and she would always add that people would always need somebody to fix things. This was her policy. She would but him having all of these manuscripts and being this serious about his writing must have meant that either he had convinced his mother somehow that his writing was important enough to let him continue, or he lived far enough away from his mother not to care. There was a small room off to the side, filled to the brim with the best food, and he walked over to the room and ate a few pieces of the fresh fruit. He continued to explore the home, which, while quite large, was very modest. A few small paintings of inanimate objects were hung around the place. He passed by a room and saw a young woman with a great big smile, but the rest of her face he couldn't quite see, and she spoke to him. "Hello, father!" She smiled at him, but that's all he could hear. As always, he knew the dream by heart by now. She would hug him, kiss him on the cheek, and back away, getting ready for whatever event she was about to go to. Whatever it was, he never saw her again after that. He would see the rest of the house before laying back down for a nap, and he didn't know how long he was out when he was awakened in the dream by a "Happy birthday, honey." And he opened his eyes to find a woman with a similar smile standing before him, looking at him. with eyes that he couldn't quite tell what color they were. She would kiss him, and they would talk about the different things that would happen in the future, the way his grandfather would finally pass away, some regent that would help the small manor town, and that the security was much better, and while relationships with neighboring parts of the kingdom were tense, as they always were, it was reported that more people respected them, at least better than they once had. She talked about how his constitution had gotten better, how Yohan had gone on to accomplish amazing things. Yohan asked her how they met, and she told him, but to him it sounded like the ocean was lapping against the rock. She would then put his hand on his shoulder. Come on now, let's get ready for the party. She then began to dress herself in the finest of clothes. It looked like something that had come out of one of the fairy tales that his mother had read him when he was just a child. But they didn't quite look like anything from any that he was familiar with. So he asked her where it came from, and she would laugh, explaining that it was from one of his own stories, and one that was quite popular among the nearby territories, even making it as far away as the fringes of some of the neighboring kingdoms. Even the great king himself was requesting that the bards in his own court tell the stories of Yohan, the Bard of the Seven Seas. He asked his wife to tell him the story, thinking he might be able to remember it for later. But like the story of how they met, it was like the waves against the rocks trying to hear a word she was saying. And she put out on the corner of the bed a nice set of robes and many things that were made of gold, rings, chains, things that people of his status would not have been able to receive. He looked at it in the mirror as he dressed and found himself to be looking a bit like a magi. The two of them were about to leave when all of a sudden he heard, "Father, Father, Father!" and two twin boys hit him head on. "Happy birthday! Happy birthday!" That's the point when he always cried. Then the dream fast forwarded to them walking down a street past an alleyway. In the alleyway, in the shadows, there was a man with a knife who, when they came upon him in their extravagant attire, sprang into action, grabbing his wife and pressing the knife to her throat. Well, my good man, what will it be, the gold or the girl? This proved to be a mistake. Yohan suddenly had an instinctual feeling come from deep down inside of him. And with a swipe of his foot to the side, hit the young man's wrist, knocking the knife to the ground and knocking the man out in the same blow. He would be out cold for several hours. The dream would then fast forward in time to later that night, where can lights and lanterns were deposited everywhere and music filled the night air. Yohan drank and danced the night away with his wife, although his wife would be drinking nothing but water. When Yohan asked why she was doing this, she told him she was pregnant. Yohan woke up as the sun began to rise. His mother was sitting on her favorite bench, right across from him. She must have seen something that he did in his sleep that disturbed her. You were talking in your sleep again. You know what the priests would say. Yohan half rolled his eyes. It never failed. Anytime something out of the ordinary happened, it's the devil. Nothing out of the ordinary could be of heaven, or heaven forbid, just something abnormal. But especially, it couldn't be from God. Dreams of a brighter future? Oh, God doesn't work that way anymore. It must be your imagination. Either that or the devil's trying to trick you into doing something he wants you to do. Don't listen to him, Yohan. He tried, as a result of these emotions and feelings that she had, to both ignore and listen to everything his mother said. It was the same diatribe as usual. Things about responsibility and learning to be a man, and Yohan knew that she was right. However, he also knew that it was very complicated because there was very little that he could do about the situation himself. Things took time. People matured and grew at different rates. And that is what was ridiculous. To expect people to experience life at the same rate. He went out of the house without a word. Walking in the wilderness between the home of his parents and the trade union outpost was quite calming, and Yohan did as was his habit since coming to the Lord a year ago on his mother's birthday, which she had said at the time was the greatest birthday present that she could have ever received. Though when he started hearing from the Lord directly and things like that, she quickly changed her tune. She thought he was going absolutely bonkers. It was never anything bad. Of course, being from the Lord, it wouldn't be. Just ideas and plans and creative ways to help people. Things that were a little unorthodox, but his mother was very adamant that God didn't speak to people in that way anymore. After all, she would say, that's what the priests are for. If not to help us hear from God, then what were they there for? This was a terrible argument in the eyes of Yohan. For the whole premise of what Jesus did was because man and all of humanity were sinful and flawed. This meant that to elevate any human being to the level of authority where they could not be questioned, that would be a grave mistake. But he knew that in this current time it was unwise to speak these things aloud. So he wrote them down. When the light is dimmed by human wit, there is a darkness that falls. The power of hell and every lie, they both consume us all. Since man began his dark descent into the depths of hell, all from the first lie ever told, the serpent told it well. Man in God's image they were made, and held in high esteem. God told the angels, you serve them as well as you serve me. That serpent, he was well displeased, for he was high in rank. And soon his high horse attitude was so bad it stank. He held a hearing in the courts near to heaven's throne, saying, what is man that you love him so? You've called them your own. Here we are. We've loved you. Been with you all this time. Now, you have a new toy? You've thrown us all aside? You want us to serve them? You want us to bow? You got something coming. You're in trouble now. I will have a back, sir. I will have those toes. I will have some red blood. I will have a nose. I will change my nature into something brand new. And God, when all is said and done, I will be like you. Well, that the Father could not stand, and so cast the serpent out. And ever since that faithful day, he put the world in doubt, twisting every truth the Father tells his child, perverting every good thing, taking tame and turning wild. From the garden where he first told man, you can have so much more. He's keeping something from you. Let me show you knowledge galore. He gave of them that dreaded fruit from that accursed tree. And as the first took a bite so small, it doomed both you and me. And since then, sin altered the realm. Dishonesty did bloom. From bottom to top, from greatest to least, this pain caused great gloom. And the lies they spread from head to tail, their damage caused a mighty wail. Their seeds growing to mighty tree when yielded by authority. So keep discernment in your hearts. From wicked men swiftly depart. For the moral is simple, children, something tried and true. If you are not careful, others rule over you. But should you walk the path of God, the path of truth and light, when oppressors come to take you, you will win the fight. The effort took Yohan a good 3 pages to get it all down. And when it was finished, he found himself about 12 feet from the front door of the trade union outpost. And as he entered, the door rang with a loud ringing of bells. And that is the end of part 1. I am going to stop this now. And I will change things up a little bit by recording some gameplay. I'm going to record gameplay and put it over this, so hopefully you guys have something to watch. Hopefully you enjoy the story. If not, I'm going to upload them anyway. Somebody will eventually like it, I think. I apologize for the dinging in the background of some of this. Notifications are going off. I'm trying to figure out how to do that and turn it on and off really easily. And actually, I think I'll figure that out later on down the road. But thank you for listening in, and I will see you in the next installment, which should be done shortly. I'm trying my absolute best to record and upload just as quick as I can, but also keeping synced into the different parts so that you're not waiting weeks and weeks between each one. Of course, doing it professionally would be easier because usually they have a recording day and they do all their recording and they just schedule uploads. I can't do that being only a part-time YouTuber. So if you're hearing this for the first time, please subscribe. Please subscribe and like the video and share it with your friends. And really, that would help me out quite a bit. I would appreciate it very much. So you have a great day. And I'll see you in the next one, which hopefully won't be too much longer. Bye.